So a few weeks ago now, we got confirmation from Ubisoft that XDefiant would be launching before the end of March 2024. This was brought up in their earnings report, and essentially unless something drastic were to happen, something game-breaking that they had to fully delay the game, then there's almost no way that that changes, since we have already seen that delay, which happened probably in October or so when they delayed the game. Initially, they kind of did it internally without properly saying the game was delayed because there wasn't a release date, but we all know the game was internally delayed. And so it feels like that is essentially impossible for that to happen again, especially since from what we have played of the game so far across the open betas and stuff like that, the game has felt like it's in a very solid state. Now, I do have a concern about XDefiant at this point that I'm kind of not sure whether or not it can actually be successful. On paper, the game should be a success. There is a lot of good stuff about the game, but there is a lot of different factors that go into a successful launch. And today I kind of just wanted to break down my thoughts and concerns about XDefiant. Now, to be clear, this video isn't so much trying to be negative, trying to say this game's going to suck, I think it's going to be a massive flop and stuff like that. I actually think the game is really solid from what we've played of it so far, and I do think it has crazy good potential if they can actually live up to that potential. So this is not me trying to just bash on the game or anything like that. If anything, I completely hope I'm wrong, because I want this game to do really well. Now, I have two main concerns about the game that do worry me quite a bit, to be honest. As of September or October in 2023, I was really confident this game would do really well. However, now less than 6 months later, I am actually very much concerned about how this game is actually going to go. Now, the initial concern that I have is that I'm kind of wondering if XDefiant has sort of missed its window in terms of the launch window. There was a lot of hype around this game when it first started making noise in early to mid 2023. There was the closed beta from April 13th to April 23rd. That had a lot of eyes on it. There was a lot of Call of Duty players that were sort of switching over and streaming it during that week or so, and it had a lot of hype. I think a lot of people were kind of bored of the Call of Duty cycle around that time, and so that initial closed beta, that was very much exciting for the people who were even remotely interested in this game, and a lot of people who didn't even know about it had now kind of turned their eyes to look towards XDefiant. Now, after that initial hype, we then had the open beta, which was in, I believe, June, maybe July, when obviously, like I just said, a lot of people had now become aware of the game, and now that it was the open beta, a lot of people were playing that, and a lot of people were having a hell of a lot of fun, especially myself. In the initial closed beta, I thought it looked cool, but I wasn't overly interested in it, and yet once I actually got my hands on it, I was completely sold on the game as a whole. There was then a tech test as well that was PC only at the end of September. That was only for around 5 hours or so. It literally just went live for about 5 hours and then it was gone for good. And that was the last time that we've been able to play XDefiant. So during all of those betas and pretty much from, say, April till September, there was a lot of hype around this game. A lot of people from a bunch of different gaming communities out there in terms of shooters anyway, but really excited about it, and we're kind of looking for a game to jump ship to, because we all know that the state of first-person shooters over the last few years just hasn't been as good as it was, say, 5 or 10 years ago. Like I said, that is now around 6 months ago when we're talking about September, and unfortunately a lot of the hype seems to have died off from XDefiant, especially when there's games like the finals, for example, that actually kind of took its chance and launched in December. It had its big open beta as well in, I believe, October, and there was just a lot of a shift in that free-to-play first-person shooter sort of community where people were looking for a new shooter, and we thought it was going to be XDefiant, at which point the finals essentially just came out of nowhere. There had been previous open betas and closed betas and stuff like that, but it was definitely in October when that game completely blew up. We saw that in the play account for the open beta, and then obviously at launch as well. That game was doing super well. It had about 250k concurrent players around the time of launch. It had around the same as well in the open beta, which is a really good play base, and it became essentially one of the most played games on Steam, and it would have been the exact same across Xbox and PlayStation as well. So weirdly enough, it kind of felt as though all this hype was building towards XDefiant. It's a new free-to-play shooter. People were getting very keen for it, and we were looking for a new shooter to play, at which point the finals actually came along and almost stole that limelight out of nowhere. Obviously not for everyone, because they are very different games, of course, but it does feel as though the finals kind of stole that thunder for a lot of people who were really keen on XDefiant. Now, that right there is pretty much my main, or my initial concern, I should say, because like I said, it looks as though, or at least feels as though XDefiant has kind of missed that window. But the second issue or concern that I have is actually also to do with the finals. Now, that game has everything it needs to be, in my opinion, a genuine powerhouse in the FPS genre. And yet, if you look at the current player base numbers on Steam, it has dropped by about 80% of what we saw at launch, which is pretty insane considering nothing drastic has really happened to the game in order for that to happen. Don't get me wrong, the game is far from perfect. There's been some issues with nukes, having these throwable canisters that can just pretty much one-hit kill certain characters in the game. There are probably some smaller issues with, there's not a crazy amount of content and stuff like that. But overall, in terms of just the production quality of the game, the graphics, the gameplay elements like destruction and the class system and the rules of the modes and all that kind of thing, the game is a genuine 8 or 9 out of 10 in my opinion, and yet its play base is sort of dwindling away for no apparent reason. Hell, even for me, I'm really enjoying the finals. I'm having a lot of fun when I play it, but even I am not super hooked on it, and I'm making content on that game. It hasn't sort of sunk its hooks into me where I'm just so addicted to it or anything like that. And for me, when it comes to first-person shooters, that's kind of what I look for. I look for those games that make me essentially borderline addicted to where I just can't stop thinking about it all day long. And I have to say, even though I've really enjoyed the finals, that just hasn't been the case for me, at least not yet anyway. Now, relating that back to XDefiant and why that kind of concerns me, it's that if another free game like that can't survive, and keep in mind, the game very well might survive as it is only still in its first season. It might just get better and better as it goes. I'm mostly just talking about the trend there, but I do think the finals can actually stick around. But that does really make me worried about XDefiant if a game like the finals is showing that sort of trend in that it's losing 80% of its player base a few months after launch. The gameplay loop itself of XDefiant is equally as fun as the finals in my opinion, but if I'm being brutally honest, XDefiant isn't really even close to the quality and the shine of the finals. Like I said, the graphics and just the way that game plays, it does feel like it's a super high production quality type of game, whereas XDefiant, to me personally, does feel a little bit more arcadey, almost feels like a previous generation game compared to the finals feeling next gen. And so again, if the finals is trending down so bad, then that does definitely make me worried about XDefiant as well. Now, it also might sound a little bit dumb comparing a newer studio like Embark to Ubisoft, but Embark is backed by Nexon, who are a multi-billion-dollar publisher, and they have got more than enough money to back that game properly. So it might not sound as drastic of a comparison as it probably initially seems. I think if Ubisoft can do it, then Embark can do it as well, because like I said, they are backed by a multi-billion-dollar publisher. I do think XDefiant has crazy potential to be a really good game that a lot of people love for years to come. I think if they can stick the landing and if the live service is really solid with lots of content and they're just constantly listening to the players and giving us, good updates and keeping it balanced and all that sort of thing, I do think the game can actually be, I guess, a staple in the shooter genre. I don't think it's ever going to be Call of Duty or Halo or Battlefield or anything like that, but I do think it actually has the potential to stick around, provided they land those things that I just talked about. But it is definitely not set in stone, and having seen the finals pretty much do that, where I think the game launched really well, it launched in a really good state, it feels and looks good, and they have done a pretty good job of, consistent updates and stuff like that. They've added a few limited time modes, plenty of new skins and stuff in the store, and even all of that is still not holding that game up to the level that it was at launch. And that is essentially where my concerns come from when it comes to XDefiant. But I'm keen to hear all of your thoughts down below. Do you guys think XDefiant can actually stick around and be successful? Do you think it's going to die off straight away? I'm keen to hear all of your thoughts, so be sure to leave them down in the comment section. But with that being said, thank you all very much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll see you all out there in the arena.